y'all remember that awesome TV show Supernatural? Well, today's feed drop is just for you. It's a show called Supernatural Then and Now, and it is the must-listen-to podcast for anyone that is a fan of the classic TV series. Rob Benedict, who played God, and Richard Speight Jr., who played the trickster in Gabriel, take us episode by episode, reviewing the episodes and telling behind-the-scenes stories with the cast, crew, and producers of this classic show. They're in the middle of season 6 now, but a great place to start is a special spotlight episode that featured series creator Eric Kripke, who is currently producing The Boys. Other guests they've had on include Jensen Ackles, Misha Collins, and Ben Edlund. We're sharing the spotlight on Eric Kripke with you now, but look for Supernatural Then and Now wherever you find your podcast and start binging episodes today.
In 2005, two brothers hit the road to chase demons and fight monsters. You know, like you do. After 15 years, they made television history and built a community of dedicated and lasting fans.
Sure did.
I'm Rob Benedict, and I played God, a.k.a. Chuck Shurley.
Yeah, you are, and yeah, you did. And I'm Richard Speight Jr., and I played the Archangel Gabriel, a.k.a. the Trickster, a.k.a. Loki. I also had the privilege of directing a bunch of episodes of the show.
Have a few more AKAs, why don't you? Jeez.
A.k.a. you're a jerk.
Though we've been involved with the series for years and multiple seasons, we never sat down and watched the entire show.
Oh, that's not true anymore. Now, we're deep into it. We are going episode by episode and diving in with the folks who made it to bring you an insider's point of view and some great behind-the-scenes stories from the writers, producers, crew, and actors. And you're getting our pure, honest, unfettered reviews.
And along the road, let me tell you, we're becoming fans.
Buddy, we are super fans.
We've heard you saying it for years, and we finally get what all the excitement's about. This show holds up after all this time and deserves to be watched and rewatched.
We will be hitting on some spoilers, so consider yourself warned. And if you have any angry emails you want to send, please direct them to Babo.
Thank you for joining our journey and listening to Supernatural Then and Now. Hey everybody, it's Rob Benedict.
And Richard Speight Jr.
And this is our Spotlight episode.
Spotlight, spotlight. We're turning on the spotlight on someone,
That's our Spotlight episode theme song that we just premiered. We've not played that in the past, but...
we're doing it now.
Yeah, going forward, I think it's going to stick. Yeah, I think it's going to stick. I can't wait for you to remember that next time we have a Spotlight episode. And the Spotlight is on the one and only Eric Kripke.
Wow, that's a pretty important person to spotlight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of going to stink to be the next spotlight person.
Yeah.
When they're like, hey, am I the most important person you've spotlighted? We'll be like, no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you don't get bigger than Eric Kripke. Not in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. See, what we do is we have certain opportunities to interview folks from the show outside of the typical episode order. So The Spotlight episodes are where we have conversations with individual guests or groups about their entire supernatural experience or specific topic. Or in this case, you know, the person without whom we wouldn't be here talking about Supernatural.
No, literally, we would be on this Zoom with nothing to talk about because we didn't know each other and there's no show being discussed. And like, it would be so awkward and weird.
Yeah. So like normally we talk about, these episodes could be about big pieces of talent or producers, or we might cover one topic like Baby or The Score or All the Angels.
Yeah.
But today we are speaking with Eric Kripke.
That's right, man. The Crypt Keeper. Wait, no.
Well,
that doesn't make any sense.
You know, that reminds me of a question we didn't ask.
I just thought maybe his nickname in high school was the Crypt Keeper. You know what I mean? Because
and again, we were talking about in the last episode, Rich, maybe it was calling him the Crypt Keeper was what gave him the idea to write horror and supernatural things. But you were saying in the last one that we put together that his initials spelled Eek.
Eek. Eric Edward Kripke. Eek.
Yeah, it could have been that, or it could have been that his nickname was the Crypt Keeper. At any rate, he created Supernatural, and so we're going to dive into his early career, the beginnings of Supernatural, some of his favorite moments, how he's thought of certain things.
So much stuff is unraveled during this interview. It's such a great interview with so many tidbits and insights. I was hanging on every word, and he's a fun and engaging guy to talk to.
That's right. A great guy, great interview. Let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Eric Kripke.
Spotlight.
Eric Kripke, thank you so much for being with us. What a treat.
Guys, I'm thrilled to be here. What's up?
This is incredible.
It's not just a treat. You realize this is the legend. We've spoken of Kripke in hushed tones now for, I don't know, 4 seasons of episodes, and now he's here, and I almost don't know what to do with
Yeah,
this.
no, thanks for saying that, Rich. It's all really true. It's so true. It's so legendary. I'm so glad you said that.
The sentence is your agent sent me that. I had to say that. That was part of the contract to get you here.
Yeah.
No, it was actually in your rider for hiring you.
It's all carefully managed.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot to get to because, obviously you're the man and lots of questions, personal and in terms of the show. So what's the story of the first TV pitch that you sold? Like, what was the journey to get into the room and set up that first show?
Oh, the very, very first one is the short film that got me in the door called Battle of the Sexes, which I made outside of college with the first thing you told me not to do was say Steve Hine, but Steve Hine was one of the producers of it.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I have to say that. And so Warner Brothers met with me and they sort of liked it and liked the writing. And it's like it was an earlier time. They were giving out TV deals like at the airport. TV was not the classy ass that it is today. It was definitely like, oh yeah, you look like you can breathe and stand upright and you're bipedal. Here's a TV deal.
Yeah.
And so I had to pitch them some shows. And then the very first thing I pitched them that they bought was a adaptation of a DC comic book. It was like a spy thing called Codename Knockout that I wrote and never got made, and they threw it out. And then after that was Tarzan.
Yes.
Which did get made to everybody's shame.
And was that, oh, really? And that was on the WB?
Yeah, it was on the WB. They were looking for like a Smallville companion at the time.
Okay.
And so they had Tarzan and they allowed me to come in and pitch on it. And, it was definitely one of those like always say you can ride the horse thing that you guys do. Like I came in, I'm like, I love Tarzan. Fucking A. Like I'm so passionate. Like I had never read. All I knew was like monkeys.
They call me Tarzan Boy. It was
right. I mean everything.
Did you come in wearing a loincloth?
Yeah. And then I went and pitched Tarzan.
Smart. That has nothing to do with Tarzan.
Hey.
I got the job, first of all, which is crazy. And then I wrote a pilot. And then David Nutter, who ended up directing the Supernatural pilot, obviously, and is the reason Rich enjoyed a long career as the trickster.
Right.
Well, actually, no, it would be a combo of
Bob Singer and him.
Nutter and Singer. Yeah. Singer too. Singer probably first and foremost.
Yeah.
So Nutter signed on to it and wanted to actually do it, which was crazy. And then we were shooting a pilot and then we were making a series. And first of all, I was 27 years old.
Wow.
And had never set foot in a writer's room.
Wow.
I was just a struggling screenwriter trying to get a job, right? And just and so my first day in a writer's room, I was the showrunner. I mean, I was partnered with somebody, but I was like one of the showrunners.
And there's no handbook they give you. You just go.
No, exactly. And if you think this story is and then he rose to the challenge, that is not what happened. I proceeded to fuck up in every way a human can fuck up.
Wow.
Like what? Do you remember specifically?
I didn't stand up for myself really with anyone. The job of a showrunner really, first among many things, but a big part of the job is slapping hands away from the candy jar. You cannot have that. No, that's wrong. And you have to protect the peace, right? And I didn't have the knowledge or the balls or the experience to do that. So my whole take on it was basically super homeless guy. And it's he's in, because he had to go to New York. That was the other part of it.
Is it modern day?
Modern day. And he's in New York. And it was supposed to be edgy and violent. And he's kind of on the rooftops. And whenever he sees someone do anything wrong, he savage. It was supposed to be this kind of dark comic ideal,
right?
superhero-y thing. And Jane was a cop naturally. I mean, well, of course.
That's amazing.
Of course. It's so good. It's so good.
Right.
But then like the WB was like, actually what this is we want to make a soap like Dynasty. And so this is going to be like a story about the drama inside like Tarzan's family. Not with other monkeys. Not with other monkeys, but with like his rich uncle. And we ended up hiring Lucy Lawless to be his rich aunt, who's lovely and brilliant and did her best with the most shit material. Right. And so like suddenly I'm like trying to write Dynasty.
Jesus.
And I was like, okay, I guess this is how these things go.
Yeah.
So it sucked so hard.
Yeah. Who was the guy who played Tarzan?
Travis Fimmel, who's now like,
I was wondering that same thing.
Legit. He was in that Ridley Scott show, Raised by Wolves. And the big thing was he was the lead in Vikings for years.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. And he was a really, really good actor.
Okay.
He was at the time when we booked him, he was a Calvin Klein model, and then this was his first job. But he was always like really good. He's like a farm boy from Australia, and was always a really sweet guy.
That's cool. What would you say? What lessons would you say you learned from that experience you got to use in Supernatural? Or was it more on what not to do?
Countless what not to do's where I literally, when I got Supernatural and I was starting it, I literally said to myself, like, I'm just going to do the opposite of what I did on Tarzan. And I did. And turns out I was a pretty good showrunner the second at bat because I went against all of my natural instincts.
Interesting.
So no, it's like you have to be all the things that I was when I was younger. Like you can't be at this job. Like you can't be afraid of confrontation. You can't be afraid to fight for the thing you believe in. You can't be afraid to protect the thing, because in the first season of a show, it's like everyone's, and when I say everyone, I mean, the network primarily, but everyone at the network is scared and they don't know if it's going to work. And so they're always like stretching and pulling and second guessing. A perfect example of that is that I never would have done earlier, but in season 1 of the show, the president of the WB at the time hated the music we were putting in the show, hated the classic rock, because he's got a show on the WB, and we're putting in like Allman Brothers and Rush and
Foghat
and Bad Company and Foghat, and like he was just like, no way, like we need current, exciting, young music.
Right.
And an earlier me would have been like, okay, I mean, I guess, but I was like, oh, sorry, that it's just, I'm going to have to quit now.
Wow.
And they were like, wow, are you quitting over the music choice? I'm like, yeah, it's sort of that important to the tone. And you can only pull that card a couple of times.
Wow.
And you have to mean it. Like it never works as a bluff.
Right.
And I was young, right? Like I needed a big thing. And they were like, is this maniac going to walk away from, his first potential success over the music? And I was. Because I had a list of what were the important things about that show that I just wasn't willing to cross. And it's like that kind of Western Route 66 vibe. The fact that it would be like genuinely scary, that, that certain sense of humor and the music, because that to me is what locked the tone into place in so many ways.
Yeah, it feels almost like especially the first few seasons, like a pulp book that you picked up, or an old comic from another time almost, right? Like it almost exists in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, it's like road trip music, right? It's like the time most people listen to classic rock is when they're cruising across Utah or something.
Right.
Yeah. And it just fits the vibe, and it makes it feel like a little timeless versus if we had like fucking put in Death Cab for Cutie or whatever. And
100%. Well, as we go back and watch it, we're like, man, aside from like the flair of the jeans, there's not a lot that dates the show. Like, clamshell phones to smartphones or microfiche or something. But it's not like every episode you're watching. You're not watching something that's jarringly a different time. And I think the music really helped with that because it was already old at that point. Like that was already time stamped as classic.
just hold that thought. We're coming right back. Thanks for listening, everybody. And now back to the episode.
What else was there? Was there anything else that comes to mind that they wanted to do that you're like, no, I'm absolutely not, I'm not doing Beatles haircuts on the boys or, something like that.
We would get in lots of fights about how gory we could make the show, of which Bob Singer was like a huge help. And I know he's been on the show, but I just want to say it like for the record, like that man is the unsung hero of Supernatural. People shouldn't be saying like they do online or the fans, and they're always like Kripke. Like it should have always been Kripke and Singer, and honestly, Singer and Kripke. Like that guy taught me everything there is to know about the job. He was there every step of the way. He was on the show the entirety of the 15 seasons, directed all the best episodes, really set the tone in terms of, really helpful in setting the tone in terms of like a lot of the creative and the performances, and like he just deserves all the credit in the world. And he really taught me also. You guys both know Bob well, and Bob is, when I was saying like I'm kind of scared of confrontation, that guy lives for confrontation. Like it's his. Yeah. Like I remember one time we were at a bar in Vancouver, and he orders, like I get like, can I have an Amstel Light or whatever? And he's like, Jack, neat, right? So they pour him like not even like
right
like
Jack.
Scotch,
yes,
like fucking Jack Daniels,
right?
So they pour him some Jack, and they put it over the bar, and he looks at it, and he looks at the bartender, and he says, "You call this a pour?" And I was like, "Who is this cowboy? Like, who is this guy?"
I love that. That's awesome.
And so anyway, back to so they would always fight us on the gore. And so one, Bob was really good at telling them like, no, we're not going to do that. And it was him and then Phil Segrisha, who we really figured out through those guys that we always delivered a studio cut with significantly more gore than we wanted. So there would always be like 20 seconds more in a gory scene. It would just be over the top. It'd be like stupid. And then they would be like, oh, there's so much gore. And then we'd fight and say, no, we can't. And they'd say, you have to. Okay. Then we would pull it back to what we wanted and then showed it to them. And then they loved it.
Yeah.
Genius.
Like that, I would say, just, trying okay, here's another good Bob story. I like telling Bob stories. So in, I forget, it was season 1 or season 2, Hilary Swank had a horror movie that Joel Silver was producing, the famous kind of belligerent Hollywood producer. Joel Silver, and they were like, we could maybe get Hillary to guest star on the show. And we're like, it's the second season of the show, and we're going to have Hillary Swank. Like, that's crazy. So Joel wants to get on the phone with me and Bob and talk it out. And I'm like, that's crazy. So Bob is I'm on the call just being quiet, and Bob's talking to Joel Silver, and they know each other from like back in the day. And Joel is like, well, I need Hillary to actively say that she's making this particular movie and everyone should go see this movie. And Bob's like, yeah, we're not really going to do that. And Joel's like,
oh my God.
They go back and forth, and now they're arguing. Joel says something to the effect of, I made a lot of really great movies, Bob. I have a good instinct on this. And Bob goes, great, like Demolition Man.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
Joel is so taken aback. And Joel's like, well, I thought that movie wasn't bad.
Wow. I think you can so see it though. I can totally
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
He's just not afraid to butt heads with anyone. So I learned a lot. I think I do it a lot nicer.
So how was that partnership? The origin story of that partnership is what? You'd been a co-showrunner of Tarzan. They bring you in and they're like, hey man, we want you to co-showrun again. Like, how did Bob become a part of the sauce?
Yeah, exactly. And remember, like I'm only 30 years old, and the only thing under my belt was like a really bad television show, like a truly terrible television show. And so they still do it a lot, where they take younger kids and they want to pair them with, someone more experienced. I met with a couple people, And the thing I loved a lot about Bob, but beyond his experience and like, the shows, I mean, Midnight Color is a dope, great show.
Right.
And so one, he was impressive. And two, Bob came in and said, look, man, I want to help you make your show. And then I want enough time that I can golf. Like, that's what I want. And so I'll be there and I'll push it all through, but I don't want to control the fucking show. I'm trying to do less, not more. And that to me was like, that's amazing, because what he, really wanted was to be into like all the shit that I knew nothing about, like the budgets and pushing all that stuff through and the logistics of production, because he comes at it like a director. And as long as he was directing episodes, like I said, he was invaluable in, giving great room advice and being there. But he also, I don't think he really likes the room very much. I happen to love it. And I think he was cool with letting the room be my domain, where like I was in charge of the room and he was in charge of every other thing outside of the room, so I could focus on the room in the beginning. And then I started to learn more and more, and then took on more and more responsibility every year. Bob gave me and I tell this to young showrunners all the time, the single best piece of showrunning advice I ever got, I got from Bob, and I got it. It was literally the first thing he ever said to me when we sat down. And he said, I'm going to tell you the most important rule of show running, which is you're in the business of making decisions. He said, and then let me give you the corollary to that rule. It doesn't actually have to be the right decision. And that's, if you can boil down show running to that one thing, it's that. Like, you have to keep the train moving.
That's why he was the best choice for you for that show. I mean, they don't make him like Bob anymore. That's such great advice.
No, they really, really don't. Yeah, everyone now are a bunch of candy asses.
Seriously.
And
right?
And Bob was just...
Don't get me started.
And Bob is just...
He's the best.
He's a legend.
Yeah.
It's all coming back to me now. Where when we needed the trickster, it was Bob he made that. What was the World War II pilot?
Sam
he made
Circus.
With you, Rich.
Sam Circus.
Sam Circus. Right. And he's like, I got just the guy. He's funny and he's smart. And he put you in front of us. He put Jim Beaver in front of us because he had worked with Jim on that Mark Harmon show he did. So
right.
yeah.
I got the perfect guy. He's funny. He's smart.
That's awesome.
He's kind of silly looking.
Eats a lot of candy.
Oh, by the way, I have if you'll indulge me in a 20-second story. So over the holidays, I was in Thailand. I went on a vacation in Thailand with my family, and I'm in this random town in the north of Thailand and at a Buddhist temple. And there's a thing you can do there where it's literally called monk chat, which is you bring them offerings of food because that's how they live, is they get food offerings. And then you can bring an offering to the temple and they'll find an English-speaking monk who will sit down and kind of talk to them about their life and how they ended up as a monk. And I mean, this is not like a big city. This is in the north. And he's telling us about it, me and my kids and my wife, about his life and how he feels about Buddhism and everything. And then finally at the very end, he's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a television writer. And he says, oh yeah, we have access to a computer once in a while. Like what shows have you worked on? I was like, you have not seen anything I've done, but I wrote on a show called Supernatural. And he says, the one where the alien is slow dancing with the guy.
Nice.
I was like, yeah, did you see that? He's like, yeah, that was hilarious. And he was totally aware.
That's amazing.
So, you have fans,
awesome.
Rich, in
that's really cool.
Caves throughout
temples all over the world. Holy men. Holy men love your shit.
I was gonna say, I've always had the holy sort of
he's big in that world.
Like the whole
it's true.
Yeah.
men of the cloth.
That's his demo.
No, it's my
Pope
people.
creams his jeans when he gets to see Rich.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
That's I'm just gonna slide back so when the lightning bolt strikes you,
my favorite part about that line is the Pope's wear jeans. That's what I enjoy most about that.
That's awesome.
Let's talk about Jensen and Jared for a second. So, obviously it wouldn't be the show that it is without Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles. When you were developing it, how close were they to what you imagined Sam and Dean being like?
No, I remember the person who deserves a lot of credit for picking those two guys is Nutter, because, as the pilot director, he's really in charge of the casting, and he's really good at that. What I remember is, like, we saw everybody, you see just dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And I don't know if anyone's told the story on this show yet, but Jared came in and was an amazing Sam. He's sort of like, like just to be an everyman and has a really relatability.
Smart.
He was also skinny then. Like, he wasn't like yoked to shit. Where you're like, he's so powerful. Like he just was like a skinny kind of kid. And that was sort of perfect for Sam. And then Jensen came in and read for Sam, was not reading for Dean, and was actually did a pretty brilliant Sam. Like, was sort of smart and interesting. So you go in those days, you guys finally remember, you'd have to do these like reads in front of studio presidents, like live, and it was so horrible.
Yeah.
And so we're doing this studio test in front of Peter Roth, the legendary president of Warner Brothers Television at the time. And so me and Nutter, we bring in Jared and Jensen to both read for Sam. And we're like, and there's not really a Dean that there's a couple of guys, but we're still looking for Dean, but here's two great choices for Sam. And both guys came in and read, and both guys were brilliant. And it was Peter. Peter's a smart guy. And he's like, well, why don't you make Jensen Dean and make Jared Sam? And then you got them both. And we were like, yeah, why don't we? And we go out and, he's in the waiting room. Right. And so, I called Jensen off to the side. I definitely remember this. And I'm like, I don't think Sam is going to happen, but like, are you interested in Dean? Because I think we can put you in Dean. And I know that's not the character you wanted. And he's like, it's funny. That's the character I always wanted. My agent talked me into the other one. So then we put those two forward. They were the only two we put forward. And then we were off to the races.
Wow.
Did he ever have to actually read the material in front of anybody, or had he read enough Sam?
No, so he did. And then we had to, I still remember this too, which is Nutter had offices in Santa Monica in a conference room in his offices. We brought in Jared and Jensen so they could read together for the very first time as Sam and Dean, and sort of just rehearse for the network test. And that's where they both found out they were from Texas and kind of connected for the first time. And even in that moment, like I distinctly and vividly, it's a long time ago, man.
Big moment though.
It's almost 20 years ago. Yeah. But I distinctly remember the chemistry even then. And you're like, oh, wow, this could work. Like, one of them just rolls with that Luke Skywalker thing, and one of them rolls with the Han Solo thing. And it fits.
Yep.
So
if they read with each other when they did the final test, were they reading together? Were they in the room?
They
together?
were. Because they were our only choices, and so we brought them in to read the scenes together. And they walked out of the room, and the network cast them said yes right then and there.
Cool. It's funny you say the Luke
That's
Skywalker
awesome.
Han Solo thing, because I've never thought that before. Now we're watching from the beginning the entire series, really for the first time, and so all these things that everyone kind of already knows are now I'm getting for the first time. But Dean especially reminds me of Han Solo. He's so Han Solo.
Yeah, and
I love the dynamic between them two. And one other thing I wanted to say, just before we talked about music earlier, the music is so important to this show too, because in first season on Netflix, you don't get to hear that music.
I know,
and so Rich and I didn't get to hear that. And then, we would read on this podcast, this episode featured and heard what the real songs were. We were like, oh man, that would have been incredible,
No,
but then it would have this other line saying,
was,
but in this digital version, you got Jimmy Baking Bread by the Salon 5.
Yeah, here's a bunch of canned shit.
Yeah.
And it's all like library shit. And shows you how old the show is, in that no one had ever thought to make a contract for streaming rights when we did the first and second season of the show. No one even knew there was such a thing. You got your Netflix in the mail, like a civilized, like a civilized human. And then Warner Brothers just didn't want to kick in the dough to buy the streaming rights of all those songs.
Well, because they were like, streaming's a fad. It's not going to stick around.
It's a fad. But if you buy the DVDs, at least the DVDs have the right music.
So we have a lot of questions that are like, did you plan on this, or was this reverse engineered kind of thing? One of the questions is around John and Mary, the early backstory that came out later about Mary being a hunter and the deal with Azazel. Was that worked out in early development, or was that reverse engineered later?
No, that was reverse engineered. The part where Mary was a hunter. The Azazel thing was pretty locked in. And really what was really locked in from the beginning was that Sam was, quote unquote, like the chosen one, but in a demonic way.
Right.
That was always from the beginning.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was always from the start. And that Azazel was like the demon who initiated it. And that eventually it was going to build to Dean and Sam having to fight. That was always from the start. I mean, look, it's part of it is once you break down the math, you're like, okay, so here's a story about two estranged brothers who have to come together. So it makes sense that when it's at the end, they have to undergo that final test of like, can they survive? Most everything else was kind of added as we went. Mary's whole backstory. You know, I used to have I'm sure someone said it on the show, I used to have this very firm no angel rule. People pitch me angels all the time, those first few seasons. And I would be like, I'm like, I keep telling you no angels. Because to me, the only way I could conceive of angels was like, I don't want, like the boys don't get help. I don't want anyone to come down and be able to help them. You know, like it's too easy to have a supernatural creature on your side.
You told me that when you called me at the end of season 5. And you're like, so you're God. Yeah. And I was like, oh, awesome. And you're like, so I can't bring you back. I was like, oh, right.
It really is the kiss of death to be God.
Yeah. But you said it was exact reason you couldn't have me coming in and just saving the day every episode, you know?
Too powerful. Like you can't have, like you need your good guys to be outgunned. Right. And so then in season 4, it like occurred to me in between seasons 3 and 4, I like suddenly came in the door to first day of the room and I was like, guys, angels. And the roar of like, you motherfucker, like after like years of telling them no angels, I was like, but they're dicks. This is the difference. They're dicks. They're every bit as dicks as the demons, just in a different way.
So good.
You know, and I think that was the missing piece the show needed. It snapped together in a way that, you know, I think the first 3 seasons, believe me, there's a lot that I love and I'm totally proud of, but like the mythology to me never quite clicked into place until I understood that humans were trapped in this war between these two sides. And it just balanced it in a way that I understood for the first time. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're in the middle. We're trapped in the middle. And it all made, you know, a lot more sense to me than, you know, the first 3 years, which was probably like The Omen,
right?
You know, or something like that.
Right.
And this one was just clicked that, you know, that's why we never looked back.
And did you always have a 5-year plan for yourself? You were going to be out in 5?
Yeah. I mean, it's only because I had written in my mind, I had mapped and mapped out is a strong word. It's a drunk cocktail napkin sketch. I mean, what I've told you is about everything I knew at the time, but I had this sense of like, okay, season 1 will go this far, season 2 will go this far. And it's not like I picked 5 for any story creative reason. It's like, I couldn't imagine in my wildest dreams getting a show that went beyond 5 years.
Right.
You know, and 5 years, you know, the end of 4 is when it hits syndication. And that's when, like, you know, hopefully you start making money. And then the 5th year. So I was just like, it wasn't like 5 years because of any master plan. It was just, that was all I could imagine.
Sure. Yeah.
But yes, there was that 5-year plan. Although if you ask Bob's like, there was no fucking 5-year plan. He never said anything to me about it. That's probably true.
Or did he look at your cocktail napkin and go, "You call that a plan?"
Exactly.
I'm glad we're talking about Bob just for a second because I want to talk about the writers' room, the early genesis of the writers' room. So you come from Tarzan. Pretty quickly thereafter, you're doing a different show. Were there any writers who came with you? Anybody from Tarzan become a supernatural writer?
No. They all very reasonably thought I was an idiot. So they all were like, no way I'm climbing into another fucking show with that guy.
So then how was that process of finding your writing team? Because that's obviously super important, just like finding Sam and Dean, really. So like, how did that go?
For sure. you take a ton of interviews and you try to find people who you vibe with. I mean, this is brutal, but it's true that in these season one rooms, if you can find, just because you're throwing darts at a board in terms of like, you don't even know the tone. And so you don't know whether they can stick that tone. And so in season one, John Scheiben, who was really a core early player because he was one of the senior guys of the X-Files. X-Files was just ending as we were inheriting, so we inherited a lot of their crew and Kim Manners, obviously. Yeah. And right. So, his knowledge of like X-Files mythology was really invaluable, and the Mulder and Scully rules we would crib a lot from. And so John was super useful. And then a young staff writer named Sarah Gamble and Rael Tucker, her writing partner at the time, and then John left a couple years later. But to my knowledge, that was kind of it. And then we had other writers who kind of, came and went and, didn't quite work out or went off to do a different thing. And so, but then the next year, so we had John and we had Sarah and Rael and then Ben Edlund.
Jeremy Carver.
Right. And then Jeremy Carver shows up. And then, so like people start rolling in, and then and you desperately try to hold on to people that are working. And then, by the time you get to the third or fourth season, you got 4 or 5 people who can write the show. Right. And then, then your job just becomes so much easier.
Do you, was there a conversation about making Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character a bigger part of the show?
For sure. We wanted Jeffrey Dean to be part of the show. When we cast him, we knew how charismatic he was.
He's a star.
And was a star, right? And so we were like, well, let's use that guy. And then we started to, and then Grey's Anatomy swooped him up.
Yeah, right.
And then suddenly, like, he's Denny, like all the time, and we could never get him. So I think the original story, I vaguely remember, Jeffrey and I to this day, like, I love the guy. He's doing a big season arc in this next season of The Boys, along with a certain Rob Benedict.
Can't wait.
Oh man, your career over, bro. But in a good way.
In the best way.
In the best way.
I can tell you I've seen some stills from Rob's work, and if you're gonna implode, this is the way you want to do it. This is he's wearing the right outfit for it. You know what I'm saying?
God. I mean, it's honest. No, what it's really gonna be is amazing, and people are gonna lose their minds. But anyway, so I think originally, if I remember correctly, there was plans to have like a lot more Jeffrey Dean. But I think it was just it got
he just got
hard to write for because he kind of blew up right around then, and deservedly so.
I have another question, Richard. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
It's such an interesting it's such lightning in a bottle, the supernatural model. Like the idea that you found the guys to the chemistry, that you found the writers' room that connected with you. At any point, did Bob have a voice in picking writers? You said he wasn't involved in the room, but was he reading scripts and helping you find the people to execute your vision?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. He was there every step of the way for everything. And especially in those early days, he would be in the room and he'd always be like, let's take a break. And then he would pull me out of the room and like give me some advice about, this story's a dead end and you got to tell them this. And, and then it took me, I'd say, over that year and then the next year to just really find my legs, to the point where like by the end of season 1 into season 2, he would come in and he'd be like, that story isn't going to work. I'm like, the cake is still baking, my friend. Don't eat raw cake. Like, let me bake the cake. It's going to be delicious. Just give me a minute.
And then what about finding the DP and because so much of the show, also Supernatural, is discussed a lot as we watch it.
Serge.
For the first time, the old original seasons.
Serge.
That it's dark, and it's got a great look, and didn't look like anything. It didn't look like some dope in a boat. Like it didn't look like the other crap that was on the CW at the time. Like you found a much cooler tone from a color palette and a look. So how did that come about?
Well, there's 2 DPs whose stories need to be told. One is Aaron Schneider, who shot the pilot, and has gone on to be a director. He directed that, that World War II Tom Hanks movie, Saving Private Ryan. No, I'm kidding. Greyhound, one where he's fighting the U-boats.
Yeah.
Aaron directed that and some other movies. And he, with David, the goal at the time, we pitched it as, at the time, like The Ring was big and The Grudge was big. And we pitched it as a horror show. I mean, people forget it's such a deep mythology now that we just pitched it of like, we're going to do a scary movie every week. And so we wanted it to look like a horror movie. And it was really lit. I mean, if you look at that pilot, like some things in that pilot are aggressively dark, like daringly.
Yeah. And it's great.
Daringly
it's so
dark.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I remember like the studio, because we weren't really like making our days. And Aaron is a very uncompromising DP. So like, and I, as a young producer, was like, hey, can you kind of like pick up the pace a little bit? And he's like, no, I can't. And I'm like, well, the studio is sort of feeling like we're not making our days. And he like looks at me, he's like, they don't pay me to be fast.
Wow.
There you go.
I know, it really is, man.
So then when it came time for series, we're in Canada. So we're just looking at film. And it was Serge's film, Serge Leducier, who was the sole DP for all of it. His resume and his reel was just beautiful. It was just really stunning. And he really understood shadow. Mm-hmm. And then we met with him and he was lovely. Then he got the job. The thing I'll say about Serge is, you can talk about literally anyone on the show, the literally thousands of people that have worked on that show over the years. The number one hardest working person on that show is Serge. More than me, more than Bob, more than Jared and Jensen. Number one hardest, most grueling work on that show, it was Serge. He never sat down in 15 years. He was there 15 hours, 14 hours a day, every single day.
He really did the work of two people.
Right? Exactly. Like I've never been on a show since that only has one DP.
Right. It doesn't happen anymore.
It doesn't happen anymore because it's too exhausting. The fact that he did all that, and I certainly, at least in the 5.5, 6 years I was there, I never saw him lose his temper once. I mean, that's crazy. Yeah. So huge props to Serge. And a lovely, lovely, lovely man, a real gentleman.
My question is, it's a selfish question because it's a question I get asked all the time that I want to know how to answer. And that is, at what point did you know that Chuck was going to be God? Was it not till the end of season 5? Was it at the beginning?
I will tell you.
Just tell me what to say.
When we originally cast you, we did think of you as a prophet.
Right.
Like the thing that you were was the thing that we cast you as. We didn't know like, and he's really God. Yeah, Like we knew that he was. The notion of like, as we were grabbing these religious ideas and revising them, the idea of like a prophet of the Lord was hilarious. And especially one that was like such a lovable, neurotic scumbag as Chuck was. But then I think the question started coming up more and more about like, well, where's God in all this? And we're like, well, God left. No one knows where God is. And then as we sort of, probably it was towards the beginning of season 5, they were like, we're going to have to answer the God question. Does he come in? Is Morgan Freeman available? Like, how do we do this? And I forget who said it. Someone's like, well, I mean, what if Chuck is God? And like, it makes sense. And we like went back and we looked over all the,
makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Like, he's down there. Like, honestly, the only one we tripped on. So it started season 5 is the short answer. But when we went back, it was the one, remember when Dean like flashed forward into the apocalypse and Chuck is there and it's the toilet paper line, the hilarious hours of debate we had because we're like, what, he's God and he's hanging out, like hoarding toilet paper? Like no one could get their heads around it.
Right. That's funny.
And there was a lot of debate over like, could he be God because that one scene? And then finally I was like, the whole thing's like a hallucination in his mind anyway.
Right.
Like,
that's what I always thought.
So yeah, it was basically you were a prophet and then you were so good. You got promoted.
That's amazing. Well, that helps a lot. Yeah, that's pretty much what I say.
Congratulations, Rob.
Yeah,
thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it. All right, thank you for that.
Took a village. It was great seeing you, buddy.
All right, I love you. Talk to you soon.
This is Jared Padalecki stopping in to say hi and let you know that we've got to take a quick break. Thank you for supporting Supernatural Then and Now. And now, back to the show.
Well, that was great.
But it was great because it's Kripke, man. Like,
Yeah.
such an interesting guy.
Yeah, it was so fun to sort of, lock him down and ask some of these questions. We get asked questions in conventions that I don't always know the answer to.
Oh, I rarely know the answer to them.
No, and so it was fun to finally ask him about the Chuck thing, about when he knew that he was God, and I get that question all the time. And to find out about his early career and the Tarzan stuff, which I never knew any of that.
No, the whole thing is really interesting. It's really fascinating to hear all about his early days, because that's a nerve-wracking period in your life when you're trying to sell a show. And I mean, he's had such massive success, but it's great to hear about what he was like and what he was thinking before all that. And we just got a shot at a show and another shot at this show, and the rest is history. But it always starts as an unsure path.
Yeah, and when you break it down, you put together anyone's career like that, you realize how many things were just he set himself up for success, and then also got a little bit of this thing happened, and because that happened, it propelled this thing to happen. And it's fun to sort of see what makes someone into the success that they are. You know what I mean? Like,
100%. The building blocks.
If Tarzan hadn't happened, which was not a good experience from him, but it spawned this other thing,
100%. You had to go through that trial and tribulation to get to where he is now.
Yeah, so it's
really awesome.
It's great.
Always a fun opportunity to spotlight somebody and do a deep dive into what makes them tick and what drives their career. This was another fascinating opportunity that I'm really glad we had, finally, to talk to the maestro himself, Eric Kripke.
This episode of Supernatural Then and Now was hosted and executive produced by Richard Speight Jr. and Rob Benedict.
Produced by Stephen Hine, written by Stephen Hine and Hada Holscher.
And edited and associate produced by Trey Booty. Music provided by Tim Wynn.
The episode was recorded with the help of Sonic Fuel Studios.
This podcast is from Story Mill Media.
Follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok at SPN Then and Now.
Become a member of the podcast at patreon.com/SPN Then and Now or on Apple.
Does this do anything?
That's all the time we have,
yeah.
so thank you. Bye.
So I killed this hooker, and oh shit, are you recording?
Story Mill Media.